It's been a hot topic of debate, as many people have been wondering who is the better college football team, Indiana in 2025 or LSU, the long thought of as the best college football team of the modern era. Yeah, sure, you can throw a couple Alabama teams in there, Miami 2001, but really the one that most people remember and most people watched and can reflect on is LSU 2019. And rightfully so, Indiana is in that conversation. Who is the better team? 2025 Indiana or 2019 LSU? And I think it's a very interesting conversation. Both of these teams 15-0. Obviously LSU played in a 14 playoff. They did not have the opportunity to play a third game like Indiana did. Both of them won their conference. LSU went 8-0 in the regular season in their conference. Indiana went 9-0 in their conference in the regular season. And in fact, when you look at the strength of record on this one, LSU and Indiana are very similar in strength of record. LSU is 25.8 in the simple rating system that sportsreference.com does. And then Indiana is a 25.35. So LSU 25.8, Indiana 25.35. Sure, LSU still stronger, but I would love to see what that looks like after the national championship game when Indiana plays that. And obviously all of this is prefaced by Indiana's only in this conversation if they win at all. If Indiana doesn't beat Miami, this isn't even a conversation. But if Indiana does beat Miami, they'll probably have a better strength of record. Excuse me. Strength of schedule, strength of record, yeah. And they would honestly probably have a better situation for themselves. Now, strength of record by sportsreference.com is assembled with the idea that it's a rating that takes into account the average point differential and strength of schedule. Now, one thing that I like that they do is when they do the average point differential, they don't assign the differential if it's lower than 7. So it's just a one score game. That's all they care about. And then they don't assign it if it's above 24 points. So if you beat a team 77-3, that's obviously going to do much better in some areas with the strength of margin of victory. But in this one, they just cap it at 24 because what's really the difference between you beating a team 63-3 and 77-3? Congrats, your backups did better. Who cares, right? And so I think that's a very interesting way to look at it, and I appreciate the Sports Reference does that. If you look at the betting odds with this, I don't know if these were FanDuel odds for this game, but I can give you the FanDuel odds of the Indiana game. But back when the national championship was played in 2020, because it was 2019 season, January 13th, 2020, LSU faced off against Clemson. LSU was favored in that game by 5.5. LSU was money line minus 220. Clemson was plus 180 money line. And the over-under for that game was set at 68.5. Holy cow. Offense galore. I think that game was what, 42-25, 49-21. Might have been 45-25. So, yeah, they went over in that one. For the upcoming 2026 college football playoff national championship on FanDuel, Indiana is a significant favorite, more so over Miami than LSU was over Clemson, an 8.5-point favorite. And on the money line, Indiana is minus 335 on FanDuel. Miami is plus 270. The total over-under is set at 47.5. Obviously showing more respect for Indiana's defense and showing more respect as Indiana is the much better team against Miami. Now, would this look different if it was a top 4 seeded team rather than the number 10 team in Miami? Maybe. Miami also beat Ohio State. They beat Texas A&M. They beat Ole Miss. So they're going to get a whole lot more credit for winning those games. In addition to that, you go to the metrics here, and I'm actually going to share my screen here. I know you guys love my my fancy graphics here, but if you look at the metrics, and from what I have gathered from many college football conversations, there seem to be 5 metrics that people hold the most value to. And I'm not saying these are the 5 that I hold the most value to, but they just seem to be the 5 that other people hold the most value to. And if you have a different one, then feel free and go check it. But of those 5 metrics, Indiana beats out 2019 LSU in 3 of the 5 metrics. One of them they tie, and the other one, LSU beats out Indiana. So in SP plus, FPI, and FEI, Indiana beats out LSU in the terms of the ranking. Now, in the rating, Indiana and LSU are tied at 33.1 rating, which I found very interesting. In FPI, Indiana is higher with a 31.7, and then in FEI, Indiana is higher with a 1.89. And Indiana is first place this season in all of those. LSU wasn't first place in any of them. They were second in SP plus behind Ohio State, third in FPI behind Ohio State and Clemson, and then second in FEI behind, you guessed it, Ohio State. If you look at average adjusted EPA per play, estimated points added per play, LSU beats out Indiana plus 37 or plus 0.37, Indiana plus 0.23. And that one definitely has some, pieces to it. It's about efficiency, consistency, all that stuff. How well do you move the ball? How well do you stop the other team from moving the ball and stuff like that? And I do think that is a valid metric. I wouldn't use it personally to, determine who is the better team, but other people might. And consistency is definitely a thing that you need to utilize. And then game control, both of these teams were first. There's no game control rating. It's just the ranking of all the teams that season. And both of these teams were first. So very close here. Tied in SP plus, I think is very interesting. And then when you get into the scoring comparison, LSU far outscores Indiana, 726 points in the season, 48.4 points per game. Indiana, 639 points, 42.6. And this is really when you begin to see the difference between these two teams, because Indiana is so much better defensively and LSU is so much better offensively, which is not totally insane. Different clock rules and stuff like that. Nowadays, the clock continues to run after first down, right? In most parts of the game, I think it's under the 2 minutes that it switches to, it has to be placed first. And then in the other parts of it, on offense, where teams were much more powerful in 2019, especially with an air raid system where incompletions and first downs were galore, you were able to stop the clock more and be able to continue to work things. So, but I do think that the average scoring margin per game tells a big story here. LSU plus 26.5, Indiana plus 31.5. So even though Indiana was not scoring as many points as LSU, still higher margin of victory. All right, and then the other part here, I'm going to actually go back to here. The other part here is I did kind of a position by position, coach by coach comparison. And I'm just going to give you my quick thoughts on this. If you guys want another video on this where I kind of go more in depth, let me know. But head coach Kirk Cinetti, Ed Orgeron. You're joking yourself if you say Ed Orgeron. Ed Orgeron essentially had one magical season at LSU, and he's not been in coaching since. He got fired a couple years later. He's not been in coaching since. Kirk Cinetti has taken one of the worst programs in college football and turned them into, probably a national champion. I don't want to say for sure yet. We'll see what happens. Offensive coordinator, Mike Shanahan. Pro spread, RPO, variety of run schemes, elite efficiency, and then Steve Ensminger and Joe Brady together, they ran the air raid, kind of a hybrid system. I'm actually going to go with Indiana in this one because similar production with more variety, and if you believe the NFL draft and everything else, less talented. The coach is objectively working with a less talented team here in Indiana. And that's what everybody has said about Indiana. They're not as talented as Ohio State. They're not as talented as Alabama. They're not as talented as Oregon. The team, the team talent ranking, yada, 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 yada. Well, great coaching makes up for a lack of athleticism, a lack of talent, whatever you want to call it. I'm not disrespecting Indiana here. I'm just talking through the talking point that's out there that, well, Indiana, they're not as talented as other teams. But what they are is an extremely well-coached team, a team that executes very well. And I think you have to give the credit to Mike Shanahan there. And then I do the same thing with Bryant Haynes here as well. Bryant Haynes and that defense was far better than LSU's defense that they had in 2019. 10.3 points per game, 21 points per game for LSU that they allowed. Yards per game, more turnovers for Indiana, better turnover margin. I don't know if more turnovers, but I know better turnover margin, all this stuff. So Indiana clears in all three coaching areas. Now, if you look at the offense, I do think that Joe Burrow surpasses Fernando Mendoza. I think at best it's a push. And that's a lot of that's just because Fernando Mendoza doesn't have the volume. He doesn't have the yards of what Joe Joe Burrow does. Joe Burrow had over 60, or he did have 60 touchdown passes. As you know, Fernando Mendoza had 41 and 6 interceptions. Sure, Joe Burrow had a better completion percentage. This is not me talking bad about Fernando Mendoza at all. I'm just saying I don't think you can give this to Fernando Mendoza here. I don't think you can give the running back to Roman Hemby here. I go with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the wide receivers and the tight ends, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. I go with over Omar Cooper Jr. and Elijah Surratt. And this is not an insult to them. This is just the way the offense was for LSU, how explosive they were, how incredible they were, how much talent they had. The offensive line for LSU won the Joe Moore Award. You have to give credit where credit is due here. It was one of the best, most elite protection groups that we've seen in college football in a long time. But then when you get to the defensive side, in my opinion, Indiana sweeps it. Defensive line, Indiana. Better production, better defensive statistics to hold teams, linebackers, Aiden Fisher, Isaiah Jones, Elijah Hardy over Jacob Phillips, Patrick Queen, those guys. They have the best havoc rate in the nation, a better havoc rate, the front seven havoc rate than LSU. Their coverage skills are elite. Their simulated pressure and what they're able to send. Their tackling ability is more elite, in my opinion. And then when you get to a defensive backs, we'll help LSU out here. We'll go with a push. Okay. LSU didn't have a terrible secondary. LSU actually had the Jim Thorpe Award winner, Grant Delpit. He was the Thorpe Award winner, and D'Angelo Pons is the best cornerback in the nation. So Lewis Moore, really good safety there for Indiana, but we'll go with a push. I think Indiana's secondary is better. I think the stats and everything else backs that up, but LSU has the awards, so we'll go with a push. LSU has the awards. Indiana has the stats. We'll say push. And then special teams is far, 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 far more Indiana. Better special teams position rate on the field. Better kicking, record for most extra points set in a season by Indiana. You have to go Indiana here. And so if you go by the position by position comparison, overall, Indiana holds the edge in 6 of 11 categories. Pretty good. LSU has the offensive firepower that Indiana has as well. They're just more efficient with it and also playing a different, time of college football with different rules. And then Indiana has more of the defensive prowess, which you could say the clock rules and stuff like that, but I still think you have better efficiency from Indiana here than you do from LSU. So overall, if my key takeaways for here is I'd probably still lean LSU for Indiana, for LSU for offense, and I would strongly say Indiana for defense. Coaching, I would strongly say Indiana. And so what I would go down to here is I would say the more talented team, LSU. The better team, Indiana. And who did we see win out this season when Indiana went up against teams that everybody said was more talented than them? Indiana. I'm going to go with Indiana as the better team here than 2019 LSU. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. I'm sure I'm going to have some LSU fans, maybe some SEC fans that are against me with it. All I would say is if you're against me with it, where do you disagree with me on this position by position breakup here? Where on the defense is LSU better than on defense with Indiana? Where on the coaching staff is LSU better than Indiana's? I think you'd have a hard time disagreeing with me on any of those. I think you can make arguments for some of the offensive ones for Indiana. I don't think you have an argument for any of the coaching or defensive ones except maybe defensive backs. And that's it. That's my thoughts. Thanks for listening to this part.